Swing dancing swept the world in the 1920s. From America to Europe, it brought with it not only a lively tune and fancy footwork, but an entire culture that quickly took root in countries around the world, including an impoverished post-war Germany. In the midst of a cultural renaissance and a short period of stability, Germans embraced swing for its carefree and liberal attitude, and soon swing clubs sprang up across the country. Little did anyone realize that from this seemingly transient fad would emerge a new generation of German youth dedicated to liberty and independence. These young rebels strove to find freedom among fascists, defying Nazi conformism through dance. They called themselves the Swing Youth. As Germany shifted from the wild 20s to the reactionary 30s, values like discipline, hard work, and cultural purity were idealized, and loyalty to the state was considered the highest priority. Organizations such as the Hitlerjugend, or Hitler Youth, and the female version, the BDM, were created to indoctrinate youths in Nazi ideology.
They were taught to follow Nazi rules without any discussion, no ifs, ands, or buts. It was done so that people would have complete obedience to Adolf Hitler. Notice it wasn't called the German Youth or the Nazi Youth, it was called the Hitler Youth.
They would wear their little kerchiefs, and of course they would sing their German songs, and they would always say Heil Hitler. I think they started probably around the age of 10. Started in school, and then of course you had the leaders indoctrinate them in very nuanced ways.
In the midst of this abrupt cultural turnaround, a group of independent teenagers resented the totalitarian government's attempts to control their lives. These young Germans refused to join the Nazi youth organizations and instead parodied them, calling themselves Swing Youth, a name derived from Hitler Youth, and using the salute Swing Heil as a mockery of the Nazi rally cry Sieg Heil. Rejecting Nazi culture, Swing Youth imitated the leisurely liberal lifestyle of England and America.
They would go and they would buy British-type clothes or American-type clothes. They would let their hair grow a little bit longer. They would wear lapels with the British or, American flag on them.
They also wore Hamburg hats, which apparently was popular in Britain, and also really long jackets, which was kind of emulating the zoot suits from America. The women wore a lot of makeup, which they weren't supposed to do, but they're emulating the pachucos in America. The language they used was really influenced by English slang, so they would call each other old hot boy and hotler and stuff like that.
Swing was considered a dangerous influence on German youth, with its overtly sexual movements and association with freedom and promiscuity.
The dancers were an appalling sight. Sometimes 2 boys danced with 1 girl, sometimes several couples formed a circle, and then, bent double, with the top half of the body hanging loosely down, they dragged themselves around practically on their knees. They all leaped around and joined in the chorus in broken English. Hitler Youth Report, 1944.
Jazz, of which swing music was a subset, was especially loathed by the Nazis.
Jazz music was not regimented. In other words, there were no real rules to that kind of music as there were to some of the older, classical forms of music. And the Nazis considered it very undisciplined, and they considered it Negro music because many of the jazz musicians were black, and they thought that it was a plot by Jews to basically destroy the culture of Germany by bringing black musicians to Germany to play their jazz. As a matter of fact, the Nazis even forbade German composers from writing any music with a note higher than a high C because they called it Neger music.
Throughout the 1930s, the government encouraged traditional German folk music, hoping to discourage the youthful obsession with swing.
It was mainly regular, popular music at that time that was played, or folk songs, a lot of folk songs.
From 1937 to 1939, the swing youth faced little serious opposition. Only scattered municipal governments banned swing locally, and the movement slowly gained momentum as it spread through major cities.
They were afraid that people would think for themselves threat to the government. And so they said, these swing kids, think for themselves. They're not like everybody else. That's when they considered them a threat.
Things came to a head in late 1939 when almost 600 swing boys and girls met in Hamburg for a swing concert. This event astounded Nazi officials, who decided stronger measures were necessary to stop the swing menace. By 1938, swing dancing was officially banned in Berlin, and by 1939, forbidden in Hamburg. Yet more and more Nazi youth were infected with the swing virus. As World War II began, swing was declared a national threat. Attacking swing was not easy. The Nazis were combating loosely connected groups of friends rather than a distinct organization, and there was no nationwide standard on how to deal with the teenagers. At first, members of the Hitler Youth acted as spies, gathering information and reporting to the police.
The Hitler Jugend would be sent into these clubs and into these bars where the swing dancing was going on, and they'd go to table after table and measure people's hair to see if it was long, and if it was too long, they would take them outside and cut their hair and probably beat them up as well.
The government also attempted to use more subtle means to discourage the prevailing swing culture.
They try to discourage people rather than forbid it outright. If you forbid it outright, kids are going to go and try it. The Nazis would try to get parents, for example, to tell their kids, don't go to these swing places because the police are giving me a hard time, or they told me, if I want a better job, I got to watch my kids a little bit more.
In March 1940, the Hitler Youth and the Gestapo began raiding swing dance halls. Swing youth were beaten, captured, detained, jailed, and even tortured by the Nazis. However, in the middle of the war, the Nazis were faced with an unexpected setback. Popular support began to shift in favor of swing music, which represented an escape from the horrors of the war. In an attempt to appease the public, the Nazis began creating propaganda music with slight intonations of jazz.
I'll dedicate this to England. Germany is beating you.
Finally, in 1942, Heinrich Himmler, the leader of the SS, took matters into his own hands.
All the ringleaders, both male and female, and all teachers who are encouraging the swing youth are to be assigned to a concentration camp. There, the youth should first be given thrashings, and then put through the severest drill and set to work. It is only by intervening brutally that we shall be able to prevent the dangerous spread of this Anglophile tendency at a time when Germany is fighting for her existence. Heinrich Himmler, 1942.
From 1942 to 1943, a large number of the swing youth were deported to concentration camps or youth protection camps like Uckermark and Moringen, which soon had around 500 inmates between the ages of 16 and 20. However, the swing youth continued to rebel even in the heart of Nazi control. Despite strict supervision, the teenagers attempted to smuggle jazz records into the camp, sang swing songs in their bunks after lights out, and used makeshift instruments to form jazz bands. In 1945, the war ended, and the Nazi government collapsed. Out of the swing youth who survived, several moved to America, but some stayed to witness the establishment of a German democracy, marking the end of their long struggle for freedom. As a largely apolitical group, the swing youth fell into the background behind more radical anti-Nazi organizations like the White Rose and Edelweiss Pirates. However, in the 1950s, famous jazz artists like Lester Young and Louis Armstrong would show their support during the war by sending letters and autographed album covers to members of the swing youth, recognized these young Germans by visiting major swing cities like Hamburg and Berlin, and even becoming members of various German swing clubs. During the war, swing was a useful escape from the hardships and horrors of daily life, but to the swing youth it was much more than an amusing pastime. With its wild routines and outgoing rhythms, swing demonstrated the extraordinary power of a true youth movement. As members openly defied Nazi laws and ideals in spite of government retaliation, swing represented a vehement protest of the censorship and oppression of the times.
Most of them were killed. They were put into jails or just directly killed. It took courage to stand up at that time.
With their liberal, never-say-die attitude, the swing youth fostered the everlasting hope for a better tomorrow.